The doors of the Harrington Grand slid open, and the lobby fell quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet. The kind that happens when something has already gone wrong, and everyone in the room knows it, and no one is sure what comes next. The woman at the front of the convoy wore a charcoal suit. She was young, maybe 32, 33, and she walked with the kind of stillness that powerful people learn to carry. Her name was Nkechi Ose Bonsu. She had flown in from Lagos 14 hours ago. She had not slept. She had not eaten. She had done one thing, which was answer a phone call from her mother, and then she had booked the next available flight to Toronto. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us go back to where it started. To a Tuesday in November, when the first snow of the season was coming down in small, uncertain flakes over downtown Toronto, and a woman named Adaora was walking up Bay Street with a plastic bag in each hand and a pair of flat boots that had seen better winters. Adaora Mensah was 68 years old. She had come to Canada from Accra 26 years ago, following her husband, who had followed a job offer, who had followed a dream that ended, as many dreams do, quietly and without ceremony. The husband had passed 4 years ago. The job had ended before that. What remained was Adaora, her 2 hands, her good sense, and an apartment on Shepherd Avenue that she paid for by cleaning offices 3 nights a week and selling jollof rice on weekends at the Malvern Community Center. That Tuesday, she was not selling jollof rice. She was carrying 2 bags of fabric, good kente cloth she had saved for 3 months to buy, from a shop on Eglinton that a woman in her church had told her about. The cloth was for her granddaughter's naming ceremony. The baby had been born in October. The ceremony was in 2 weeks. Adaora had promised she would sew the outfit herself. The snow was picking up. She had taken the 25 bus as far as it went and walked the rest. Her left knee, the one she had hurt slipping on ice 2 winters ago, was telling her, as it always did in the cold, that it remembered, that it had opinions, that she should perhaps sit down. She looked up at the Harrington Grand. She had passed this hotel 100 times. It sat on the corner of Bay and Wellington, all glass and pale stone, the kind of building that seemed to be composed entirely of good lighting and quiet judgment. She had never been inside. But the snow was coming harder now, and her knee was specificus in its complaints, and the bags were heavier than they had looked in the shop. She thought just for a moment, just to rest. She pushed through the doors. The lobby was warm. That was the first thing. Warm in the way that only expensive places manage to be warm. Not just heated, but cushioned. The air itself softer somehow, smelling faintly of cedar and something she couldn't name. There were chairs near the window. Real chairs, upholstered in cream fabric, arranged around a low table with a vase of white flowers on it. Adaora made her way toward them and sat down, setting the bags carefully at her feet, and let out a long breath. She had been sitting for perhaps 4 minutes when the woman appeared. Her name was Giselle Fontaine. She was the lobby manager on duty, and she was 29 years old, and she had been watching Adaora since she walked in. She stood now at the edge of the seating area with her arms crossed loosely in front of her, and her chin at an angle that communicated without words that a calculation had been made and a conclusion reached. "Excuse me," Giselle said. "Are you a guest with us?" Adaora looked up. "I am not," she said. "I only came in from the snow. My knee, I just need a few minutes. I'm afraid these seats are reserved for haute guests." Adaora looked at the chairs. 3 of them were empty. The lobby was not crowded. "I understand," she said. "I will not be long. I need to ask you to wait outside." Giselle's voice was pleasant in the way that exclusion is sometimes delivered pleasantly. Wrapped in a professional tone, handed over like a receipt. "We have a policy. It is snowing," Adaora said. Simply, not arguing, stating, "I'm aware of that. There's a Tim Hortons 2 blocks down." And then something shifted in Giselle's expression. A small tightening. She looked at the plastic bags. She looked at Adaora's boots. She looked at the coat. A good coat, actually. Navy wool, but old. The hem uneven, where Adaora had repaired it herself with thread that was almost but not quite the right shade. Giselle looked at all of it, and whatever thought crossed her mind, she did not share it. She didn't need to. Adaora had been alive 68 years. She had seen that look in many rooms in many countries, and she knew what it meant. She stood up slowly. Her knee said what it always said. She picked up the bags. "I will go," she said. "Thank you," said Giselle. Adaora walked to the door. The doorman, a young man named Theo, who had been watching from his post and who could not bring himself to meet her eyes, held it open for her. She stepped back out into the snow. She stood on the sidewalk. The flakes were steady now, settling into her hair, onto the fabric bags. She shifted the weight in her hands and thought about her granddaughter. Thought about the kente cloth and the color she had chosen, deep green and gold. And the little dress she had planned out in her head on the bus ride over, the way the collar would be. She thought about these things because it was better than thinking about the lobby, and the chairs, and the woman with her arms crossed. Then she put down the bags. She took out her phone. She made one call. It rang twice. "Mama," said the voice on the other end. "Nkechi," Adaora said. "I am fine. But I want to tell you something." Nkechi Bonsu had started her first company at 24, in a rented room in Accra, with a laptop and a contact list of 40 people. By 28, she had offices in Lagos and Nairobi. By 31, she had completed the acquisition of a mid-size hospitality group with properties in 6 countries, including 2 in Canada. One of those properties was the Harrington Grand. She had not told her mother this, not because she was hiding it, but because Adaora was not particularly interested in portfolios. She was interested in her granddaughter's naming ceremony, and whether the jollof would have enough bay leaf, and whether Nkechi was eating properly in all that travel. These were the things they talked about. When Adaora called that Tuesday afternoon and told her, quietly, what had happened, Nkechi did not say much. She asked a few questions. She confirmed the address. She said, "Mama, go somewhere warm. I am coming." Adaora said, "You don't have to come all the way here for this." Nkechi said, "I know." She booked the flight anyway. What happened in the 14 hours between that phone call and the doors sliding open at the Harrington Grand is not entirely known to us. We know that Nkechi called her operations director. We know that certain files were reviewed. We know that she did not send an email to the hotel's general manager, whose name was Stuart Calloway. She did not alert him at all, which is a particular kind of message in itself, the silence before something arrives. Stuart Calloway was in his office on the 4th floor when his assistant knocked, and said that there was a convoy outside and someone from corporate was coming in. He had not been warned. This is relevant. He came downstairs quickly, straightening his jacket, arriving in the lobby at the same moment the doors opened. He saw the woman in the charcoal suit. He recognized her from the company photos, though she looked different in person, more direct somehow, the way people who have actual authority often do, a quality that photographs cannot quite capture. "Mrs. Bonsu," he said, extending his hand. "This is unexpected. We weren't notified." "I know," Nkechi said. She did not take his hand immediately. She was looking at the lobby, at the chairs by the window with the vase of white flowers, at the doorman, Theo, who was very still, at Giselle Fontaine, who had appeared at the edge of the lobby and was standing with the particular stillness of someone who has begun to understand that something is wrong but does not yet know what. Nkechi shook Stuart's hand. "I'd like to speak with your lobby manager," she said. They went into the small meeting room off the main corridor, Nkechi, Stuart, Giselle, and a woman from Nkechi's team who took notes without being asked to. This is the kind of detail that tells you everything about an organization. Who takes notes, and when, and without being told. Nkechi sat down. She folded her hands on the table. Yesterday afternoon, she said, a 68-year-old woman came into this lobby to rest her knee out of the snow. She was carrying fabric she had bought for her granddaughter's naming ceremony. She sat in one of the lobby chairs for approximately 4 minutes. She was asked to leave. Giselle said nothing. She was told there was a Tim Hortons 2 blocks away. Giselle's jaw was very still. Do you remember her? Nkechi asked. A pause. I remember asking someone to leave who was not a guest, Giselle said carefully. That woman, Nkechi said, is my mother. The room was quiet. But I want to be clear about something, Nkechi continued, because I think it is important and I want Stuart to hear it also. She looked at both of them. It does not matter who she is to me. It does not matter that she is my mother, or that I own this building, or any of that. What matters is that it was snowing, and she was 68 years old, and her knee hurt, and she needed 4 minutes in a warm chair. That is all, and she did not get it, and I want to understand why. Giselle opened her mouth. Not a policy, Nkechi said. I have read the policy. The policy says that lobby seating is prioritized for guests. It does not say that a woman in the snow with 2 bags of fabric should be asked to walk 2 blocks to a Tim Hortons. Another silence. The policy, Nkechi said, is not what made that decision. Something else did. And I think, if we are honest with each other in this room, we all know what it was. Giselle looked at the table. Stuart Calloway cleared his throat and then did not say anything. I am not going to end your employment, Nkechi said, and she was looking at Giselle when she said it. I thought about it on the plane, and I decided that ending your employment would be easier than what I am actually going to ask of you, which is harder. Giselle looked up. I am going to ask you to think about what happened yesterday. Not the policy, not the procedure, the actual moment, what you saw, what you assumed, and what those assumptions were based on. And I am going to ask you to sit with that. She paused. Because if I end your employment, you walk out of here with a story about a difficult corporate owner who overreacted, and nothing changes. You do the same thing somewhere else. The next Adaora gets told about the Tim Hortons down the street, and we call that an outcome. She stood up. I have spoken to Stuart about some structural changes to how we train lobby staff at all our properties. That process will begin next month. You will be part of it. She looked at Giselle steadily. You are good at your job in a number of ways. I saw the quarterly reports. I am not dismissing that. But good at your job is not enough if you cannot see who is standing in front of you. She picked up her jacket from the back of the chair. That is all, she said. There is a young man who works the morning shift at the Harrington Grand. His name is Solomon, and he is 23, studying hospitality management at Ryerson on evenings and weekends, putting in 30 hours a week at the hotel because the tuition does not pay itself. On the Tuesday in question, Solomon had not been in the lobby. He had been on a break when Adaora came in. He heard about what happened from Theo, later, in the break room. Solomon did not sleep well that night. The next morning, he was at the door at 6:15, which was early, because he wanted to think. He stood at his post and watched the snow, which had stopped overnight and left the street clean and white and quiet. At 6:40, a car pulled up. Not a convoy, just one car, a black sedan. Adaora got out, carrying the same 2 bags. She was wearing the navy coat and the flat boots, and she walked toward the entrance with the careful step of someone who knows about ice. Solomon held the door open. Good morning, ma'am, he said. She looked at him. Good morning, my son. Can I help you with those bags? She hesitated, then let him take one of them. They walked inside together. In the lobby, a chair had been moved slightly closer to the window. On the table beside it was a cup of tea, still steaming rooibos with honey on the side in a small ceramic pot. A folded note beside it said, "For whenever you arrive." N. Adaora stood in front of the chair for a moment. Then she sat down. She set the bags at her feet, wrapped her hands around the cup, and looked out at Bay Street, where the morning light was coming in flat and gold across the snow, and the city was beginning, slowly, to wake up. She did not cry. She was 68 years old, and she had been through things that deserved tears more than this. But she sat with the warmth of the cup in her hands and thought about her granddaughter, and the green and gold dress she was going to sew, and the way a naming ceremony sounds, when all the women gather, and the baby is held up and given a name that means something. She thought about what it means to be seen, not because of what you carry, not because of who your daughter is, just because you are there, and you are cold, and there is a chair, and that is enough. Solomon stood near the door and watched, and did not disturb her. Nkechi flew back to Lagos 3 days later. Before she left, she had one more conversation with Stuart Calloway, about training, yes, and policy language, but also about something less formal. She told him a story about coming to Toronto at age 7, when her mother worked 2 jobs and wore the same coat 4 winters in a row, because there was no money for another one, and how Adaora had always carried herself like the coat was exactly what she had chosen to wear, because dignity, her mother used to say, is not something anyone can give you or take from you. It is something you decide. Stuart Calloway listened. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had managed a hotel for 11 years and had inherited systems and trained staff within those systems and had not, until now, been asked to look at what those systems quietly assumed. He was quiet for a long time after Nkechi stopped speaking. "I have a mother too," he said finally, which was not an apology, exactly, but it was something. Nkechi nodded. "Most of us do," she said. The naming ceremony was on a Saturday, 2 weeks later, in a church hall in Scarborough that smelled of jollof rice and candle wax, and too many people packed into a room that was exactly the right size. The baby's name was Abina, a name for a Tuesday-born girl, which she was, and when she was held up, all the women in the room made a sound that has no translation in English, but means something like yes, and also welcome. And also, we have been waiting for you. Adaora sat in the front row in a dress she had made from the green and gold kente cloth. The baby wore an outfit to match. The stitches were very small and very even. The collar, exactly as she had planned it on the bus. That Tuesday in November, the cuffs finished with a detail she had added at 3 in the morning because she couldn't sleep and her hands needed something to do. Nkechi sat beside her mother and held the cup of tea they had brought from home in a thermos, because it was cold outside, and they had learned, both of them, in different ways, never to wait to be offered warmth. If you are watching from Canada tonight, from Toronto, or Scarborough, or Brampton, or somewhere smaller, somewhere the winters come hard and early, drop your flag in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. And tell us, do you know someone like Adaora? Someone who carries herself with that kind of dignity, in a coat that has seen 4 winters, in boots that remember every sidewalk? Leave her name. She deserves to be said out loud. Subscribe if this story found you. Share it if you know someone who needs to hear it. And we will see you in the next one.